Okay, in studio right now is Trinh Truong. It's been a while, Trinh. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So now you're currently at Yale, is that correct?
I am. I leave tomorrow to start my junior year.
Okay. Does it start?
Junior year?
Yeah.
Already?
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
But I'll be taking a gap year after this year to work on a pretty low-key congressional race locally.
Oh, you're going to do that. It is going to be low-key. Do you think it'll be low-key?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm assuming you're going to be working on Anthony Brindisi's campaign.
Yes.
Okay. And interestingly, was Anthony on the school board when you were in school? At some point when you were in school, he was.
Right.
Yeah, so when I was in school, he was a local school board member.
Yeah.
And then when he was a newly elected member of the assembly, we did a lot of, he came to a lot of education protests and rallies to call for more funding.
Yeah.
And throughout the years, we've kind of just, kept working on those issues together. So he's shown himself to be a great supporter and a very loyal elected official that supports public education, teachers, and students.
So your big thing is you're representing the Alliance for Quality Education here.
Yes.
You feel that that Congresswoman Tenney took money from someone who is not only anti-public education, but you say racist. Why racist?
So earlier this month, this Wall Street billionaire hedge fund manager, Daniel Loeb, who should have no, interest in upstate elections or any interest in local education policy, considering he's from New York City.
Yeah.
He made a comment about the highest ranking African-American female elected official in New York State, and he was attacking her for supporting traditional public education in public schools and students, and he said that she was worse than the KKK and has done more damage to communities of color than anyone in a hood.
Based on the fact that that in inner city schools, our kids are being left behind, and definitely, I'm assuming, targeting the minorities that seem to be left behind in school districts.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I'm assuming what he's saying
You're trying
is,
to translate what he's saying.
I'm translating what he is saying is that in inner city schools, we have left, specifically left minority students behind.
Right.
I mean, the numbers show that. The statistics do show that is the case. Now, what's causing it is very deep and is very complicated. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I would also say that school privatization and charter schools are not the answer to that.
Right.
And there have been, a great number of studies done that show that charter schools actually produce statistically insignificant outcomes in comparison to public schools. So they're not better, but what they do is, they fragment the local tax base and pretty much introduce more competition to public schools.
Yeah.
And you would think that this is a good thing, but how can you expect all students to do better when they're dealing with less and less resources? Right. And fundamentally, charter schools are, they're not good for local control of education, which is what Congresswoman Tenney touts.
I would be surprised that Congresswoman Tenney would be for a privatization of schools. I mean, her assembly office was over in Westmoreland. She seems to be somebody that's been pro-education over the years. Would you think that this is in contrast to that? Do you think she's changed her ways since she's made it to Washington?
I've definitely seen Claudia Tenney at a few, rallies and events for increasing public education. But the thing is, she's failed to take any solid stance on education. And last month, she was actually in Cortland, and she was, hailed as an ally of charter schools because there's this one charter school called Truxton Academy that wants to come in, and she came and she spoke to them. So I think that, at best, Claudia Tenney is vacillating on her views on public education, and she needs to be stronger about saying that she supports teachers and students and increasing state aid, which is what is fundamentally causing,
Sure.
I think, the achievement gaps between minority students and students of different socioeconomic statuses.
But what do you say to somebody that says, this is a deeper problem than this? I find myself, here I am, I'm now being the devil's advocate, which I normally am on the other side. And I'm now defending Claudia Tenney.
I'll sit this one out. Go ahead.
You want to? Yeah.
That's okay. Thursday, August 24th, 7:45.
I'm getting into some weird waters here right now. I'm just saying this. But the fact that part of the problem is that in order to support these charter schools, we take then from, so when there's a charter school that opens up in Utica, there's only so much aid that's coming to Utica, and some of that aid ends up coming away from Proctor and coming away from the Utica School District. So that is part of the problem. But I guess, though, what would you say to someone who says, we're throwing money at this problem? New York State throws more money at education than any other state in the nation. And what do we have to show for it in the big inner city school districts?
So I think the most important thing about school funding is not necessarily how much is coming in, but how it's spent. So I think that, like schools that do see better improvement rates generally have kids that come from higher socioeconomic statuses and, don't have a lot of things going on at home. So when you invest things in like wraparound services and programs that are designed to benefit kids, and great examples of this are schools that have been in receivership in the Utica City School District for not performing well. So I graduated from Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School, right smack dab in the middle of Cornhill.
Yeah, but you had family support.
Right, but aside from that, so a few years ago it went under receivership, and that mandated that the district set aside additional funds to, rehabilitate the school and to have better test scores and better achievement.
Yeah.
And when they took, I don't even think it was a lot of money. It was definitely a few $100,000 and just did things like bust every single kid into school, had extended day, had additional before and after school programming. That school and its students and its scores improved drastically. And of course,
because otherwise those kids are, I hate to say this, but those kids are out roaming the streets. Who knows what's going on in some of those kids if they don't have parental supervision. Now, if you're at school later and earlier, you're getting meals, you're getting the things you might not be getting at home.
Right,
and
but
I think that's
it's,
a positive. That's a positive program, and that was taken away. You're saying?
Well, it wasn't taken away. The school got off the receivership list, and then a different school, came under receivership and was siphoned that extra money. So what happens is this whack-a-mole game where, it's a different school every year. And the problem would just be ameliorated if the Utica City School District and other local school districts got additional funding overall to cover all of this programming that they wanted to do.
Listen, we're going to have on the ballot coming up in November a constitutional amendment where New York's Constitution could actually be ratified. There'd be a whole committee, the whole 9 yards. A lot of people are against that. Where do you stand on that? I know Anthony Brindisi's against it. And part of that is because they feel that it could cost school districts. They change the... Right now, of course, part of that, there's an amendment that guarantees that every student in New York State is entitled to I forget the actual wording of that, but it's a fair, equitable education. Sound and...
So the phrase is sound basic education.
And that could go away, possibly.
Right. And what is really concerning to me is that we are the only state that privileges, educational equity and quality in our Constitution like that. So I'm incredibly worried, not about what goes in more so, but more about what's going to come out.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So you'd be against that?
Generally, yes.
Voting no on that. So Claudia Tenney took, looks like $5,400 in campaign donations from Daniel Loeb. You wanted to give that back. What response have you gotten from the Congresswoman?
So her office put out a statement that pretty much, defended her taking of the money, but not, the reason why we're calling on her to give back the money.
Do you have the statement, Andrew?
Yeah, so the exact statement is, it's clear that in Anthony Brindisi's world of politics governed by the rules of Cuomo, Silver, and Halbritter, a campaign contribution means you have to give the donor something in return.
Wow, there are a lot of hits in there.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. Just getting them all in there. That's the corrupt pay-to-play culture Claudia Tenney has always fought. Claudia always votes the interests of the district regardless of the positions of her donors. Claudia always stands up for public schools. If Anthony Brindisi wants to get into a discussion about people like Nancy Pelosi bankrolling his campaign, we look forward to it. We will use the contribution to expose Brindisi for who he really is and his radical left-wing funders. Consider it a public service.
All right, Trin, take it away. How do you respond to that?
I mean, I think that money talks. And if you look at where the money's coming from, it'll tell you a lot about the special interest behind it. So Daniel Loeb isn't even a Republican. He's one of the few Democrats that supports charter reforms, not even in her party, not even local from the area, is this, removed New York City Wall Street hedge fund manager. So I don't see, any other reason why should we be taking this money except, to support complicitly charter school privatization. And Daniel Loeb is the chairman of the Success Academy Network, of charter schools in New York, which has been extremely controversial. And he is known for bankrolling campaigns with elected officials or candidates that are committed to charter school expansion.
All right. How old are you, by the way, Trinh?
19.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she's 19. A junior at Yale. You'll be a junior this year at Yale. Hard to believe it's gone by that quickly. Then you're going to take a year off. You're going to work on Anthony Brindisi's campaign. What have you learned since you left Utica and you spent time at Yale? What have you learned there? And I'm not obviously you've learned things, but you know what I'm saying. What is the big takeaway for you?
I think the big takeaway from me is actually, like east or west, home is best. So my times at Yale have kind of taken me all over the world, and I just got back from a few weeks in Europe, and like Yale's in New Haven, so it's a little bit farther away in a bigger city than Central New York. But I see myself growing more and more fond of this area, not only because of family, but because of the community here, and because of the fact that these are where my roots are and these are my people. Yeah. So I've become more rooted here, ironically, the more time that I spent away.
The more time you spent away. That's interesting. And finally, there was a story the other day, and you had some involvement. You don't want to talk about that?
No.
I got to at least get into it a little bit. It was a story about the. Did you learn anything from that? I would say this, because you got tied into that story.
I'm not going to comment on that because I'm here to talk about opposing privately run charter school networks.
All right. Well, you understand why I'd bring something like that up. I mean, it was an issue that kind of got people jumped the gun and then brought quotes in that you said that you didn't say and put you in a kind of a tough position. There was a story of the child that had died with the guy backing out of the driveway, which was an awful story. But there was a rally and a candlelight vigil and that sort of thing, and it ended up being a pretty sad story about a very, very sad story. So I'll honor that, and I won't drag you into that anymore. End of the day, though, you feel Claudia Tenney should give the money back. Yeah,
especially after those horrific remarks that he said about this, high-ranking legislator. Only compounds the reasons for her to give the money back. Right now it's not only just about charter schools and what's good for our local schools and local control of education, but it becomes about being complicit in this guy's racist remarks.
All right. You're 19 years old. Who are you going to inspire by working on Anthony's campaign? Do you think you'll inspire older people? Or do you think you can get a young vote out for this congressional election, which, by the way, is a long ways away, and we're already talking about it now?
One thing that I'm really looking forward to is going out and mobilizing underrepresented communities that generally don't show up to vote. Mm-hmm. So that means people like my mom, who is a former refugee, and if there isn't someone there to take her to the polls on election day to explain to her the candidates and to tell her her rights to take time off of work, she would never make it out. Yeah. So I want to do a lot of outreach and teach people about their voting rights and, energize them to get out to vote and to explain to them and to have conversations about why voting matters. There are a lot of things on the line in this next election, including healthcare, education, all these different things that are happening at the federal level. And I think that now is not the time to be complacent and to sit out and sit on the bench when it comes to American politics. Now's the time to, use their First Amendment rights, to get out to vote, and to really be a citizen, an active citizen in this country.
Pretty awesome there, Trinh. It's going to be very interesting to see where you end up. But you'll be back at Yale starting tomorrow, and then we'll see you back here next year being a little political, very political once again. So thanks for taking the time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Okay, hold tight. By the way, a product of Proctor. We're talking about good things and all of this back-to-school talk. A product of Proctor. And one of the great things that has come out of that school, which is always so much under fire, right? We'll take